All right, three, two, one. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman. Today, I got a real treat for you. His name is Graham Mitchell, and he is the city manager of the City of El Cajon in beautiful California. Graham, say what's up to everybody.
Joseph, thanks for having me. This is a real treat, actually. By the way, I appreciate what you're doing, getting the word out of the
Sure.
cool things that local government does day in and day out.
You know, I always felt like the cities don't do a great job at self-promotion, so I'm just here to help, And I get it. You don't want to be standing on the mountaintop screaming about what you do so great. So I'm just here to help you tell it, man. I'm your megaphone for you. So let's dive into it. You're the city manager, and some people say, "Oh, city managers aren't public works," but I feel like if you serve the public through your work, you can be on the show. So let's talk about what Graham does all day, every day, besides grow some beautiful plants. Like, what are you doing from the time you start to the time you can leave the office?
Well, like a lot of government jobs, the reason I love it, it's so different. Every day is
Mm.
so different. And I'll be honest, you're the only time I'm talking about public works today. Today is a lot of homelessness and traffic cameras and some other things like that we're dealing with. But every day is different. It's the beautiful thing about this job. But the public work stuff is the fun stuff, though. So
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
I work a lot. Is people don't know this, but the city manager is really the bridge between city staff and the elected officials. So I spend a lot of time working with the city council and making sure that they're taken care of and understanding what their needs are, and ensuring that the policies that they're directing us get implemented, but communicating that with them. So I spend a lot of time with them. I spend a lot of time with the public. And like you said at the beginning, Joseph, we don't do a great job promoting what we do. In El Cajon, we're trying to flip the switch on that a little bit.
Nice.
We recently hired a marketing and engagement manager, a private sector person. We wanted somebody with no government experience, and just to help us promote what we do from a fresh perspective. And so that's been a lot. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and then just time with my directors, my department directors, including my public works director. So
Sure.
it's fun. Every day's fun.
Interesting. So you kind of paint a different picture for me, and it helps out because you said you are the bridge between the city staff and the elected officials. So, and then you also said you have a big push at El Cajon to be able to, I guess, communicate to the public. So it's internal communication and external communication. Like, is it a different sides of your brain start working at each time, or like how do you compartmentalize when you're going to talk to the public versus when you're going to make that bridge, a smooth passage between the elected officials and the city staff?
That's a really great question. I mean, the reality is a good, transparent government should be communicating the same thing all the time, right? Like, I should not be telling council members one thing, but the public a different thing. But how we communicate is pretty important, right? Because my council members want to hear a certain type of communication. Frankly, different council members want to hear it different ways, right? Like, one prefers text, one prefers a phone call, one prefers face-to-face, right? So it's understanding their needs. But then to the public, how do we communicate broadly to the public? That is one of the greatest challenges, I think, in local government in the current era, is how do we effectively communicate, especially in an era where typical traditional media, newspapers and per se, have gone away, right? And so how do we get the word out in an effective way?
Yeah. Okay. I like it. So let's say you're mentoring some youngsters, right? And these kids are coming fresh out of college. They're like, hey, I want to be a city, or fresh out of high school. I want to be a city manager one day. I want to be like Graham. What would that one skill set be that you would tell them to pick up to be successful at what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think about that question a lot. And in fact, I teach a class at San Diego State University about that very topic, right? So I spent an entire semester talking about that, and you could write volumes of books.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to three big things, though. One, I think, is the ability to communicate, the ability to articulate not only the what, but more importantly, the why. and to explain values and the purpose, the reason why we do the things that we do. I think it's increasingly important to be able to explain that. I think it's also in today's era, we cannot continue to do the same thing the same way and expect something new. Our world is evolving so quickly out there. And if we say, well, that's how we used to always do it, you will be a dinosaur. So having the ability to think not only critically, but innovatively, I think is another huge skill that I think any new leader in government has to have. And then lastly, and we've always needed this one, but is empathy. We need just more empathetic leadership. And I think if you look at how we used to define leaders, I'll go back to the 1950s, empathy was clearly not one of the words that was used, right? But we need more empathy in how we lead and how we govern and how we communicate.
Sure, sure. You talked about innovation, and that's a word that's near and dear to my heart because I have a service that I would say it's something new that city people get introduced to, and they're like, "Oh, that's pretty interesting, pretty unique." But then I can tell there's a sense of, you know what, I don't want to take a risk on a new product, new service, new doohickey, new uh, thingamabobber because what's the reward versus what's the risk? The risk, something can go bad and screw up everything and I look bad versus the reward of like, oh, something is 1% better. So how do you you said innovation. What would be your advice to those out there who are like, I got 6 years left on the clock here. I'm just about to be done. I don't want to take any risks to stain my name on the way out. Like, what do you say to them to be okay with some type of innovation?
If you're not ready to innovate, you need to walk away from your job. I'll just say that, right? Even if you got 6 years, even if you have 1 year left, here's I get it because the risk is so massive. It's all the analogy I use is sometimes we are told that we need to build an airplane. It's never been built before, and we have to carry 150 passengers. Good luck, right? I mean, the risk is so great.
Yeah.
Because the failure is critiqued by the public. In the private sector, there's an expectation of failure. It's budgeted into your annual budget is failure because you can't be innovative unless there's failure, right? There's no budget for failure in local government. So the way we've got away with it, right? The way that we tackle it, I should say, is we do a lot of pilot programs, small things. Let's try this out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? And if it works, let's try to build on it. And we spend a lot of time looking at that ROI, that return on investment.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll hash that out, and we'll spend a lot of brain power on trying to understand that. And I'm not a believer in doing innovation for innovative sake, right? I go to a conference, I see really cool doohickeys that I would love to have, but I just I can't justify the ROI, right? So if I can come up with the ROI, and I have city council members that really understand the business aspect of local government, it's easy for me to pitch that innovative idea to them. But a lot of times it's through pilot programs. We're doing a couple pilot programs right now, and we'll see where it goes. And at the end of the day, we may continue, or we may say, you know what, lessons learned. We learned this, and this. Yeah. Let's move on to the next innovative idea.
Love it. So how did Graham get started in this? What in high school, were you trying to bridge the gap between city staff and elected officials? Was this you in junior high school? Like, give us your career path from where you're at today.
So I grew up in Virginia, outside of the Washington, D.C. area, and everyone I knew, including my parents, worked for the federal government. And that's what I didn't even know that the words city and manager were two words linked together, right? I didn't know anything about my local government. I had an economics class in 12th grade where we went to the county. I think we went to the county planning department, and that was my first kind of exposure to local government. I had, by the way, zero interest in that. I wanted to work for State Department or Department of Commerce or maybe one of the intelligence agencies. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I went to school. I studied international relations. I worked as an intern for the federal government. We could do a whole podcast on the the insane bureaucracy of that. But
I'm sure.
when I graduated from college, I was stuck with a quandary of when I graduated, the federal government had a hiring freeze. So there was no government jobs available for what I wanted to do. So I said, well, do I go back home and do a job I don't want to do and live in my parents' basement, or do I go to grad school? So I went to grad school. So I racked up some more debt, right?
Yeah.
And I went to University of Southern California, and USC MPA program at the time required local government MPA students to have a local government internship. And so I got this job working in a city manager's office in a place called Monterey Park. And it wasn't the first day. It was like this. It was in the first week. It was one of the first days I was there. My job was to answer phone calls and field complaints from the residents. And this is my
So much fun.
Pre-email, pre-internet, right? So there was no way to email people. So it all came into the phone. And so that was my job. And so I took this call from this nice lady that had a pothole at the end of her driveway. So every time she backed out of her driveway or came home, there was no way to avoid it. Her car hit the pothole. And so I understood that's a problem. So I called up. Here's my connection to Public Works, Joseph. I called the Public Works director up. His name was Ron Mary. I said, Ron, there's this lady that has a pothole. And he said, Graham, I got good news for you. Our crews are a few blocks away doing a big street project. I'll just send 2 guys over with a truck and we'll fill the pothole. So literally within an hour of her calling me, somebody else fixed the problem. I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you got something done. Woo. Yeah.
I got it done, right? And the next day, I had a plate of cookies waiting for me from that lady, right?
Yeah.
And I realized I had the ability to make people's lives better, their quality of life better. This happened at the same time as my dad was working for an agency, and he spent months and months in Hong Kong working on this big report for the federal government. And his report was like this thick. And as it worked up the bureaucracy, it got thinner and thinner and thinner to the point where it became a bullet point and a PowerPoint presentation to the president of the United States. Pretty cool still, right? Like his work got presented to the president, but as one sentence, not even a complete sentence, right? So I had to ask myself, did his work result in the quality of life of Americans? Probably not, right? But me as a lowly intern in Monterey Park, I influenced a woman's life dramatically. And so it was that first week on the job, I scrapped any ambition to work for the federal government. And I said, I want to work for a city government and I want to be a city manager. So that's how I got my start. Dude,
that's a good story, man. That's really cool. And it's cool that you got cookies from it. Like that's icing on the cake.
And I was a poor, starving student, right? So I love to play the cookies. It was dinner for 2 nights.
So you talked about a positive, and the reason why I kind of asked for I wouldn't say a negative, but a story of some type of adversity, because there's other city managers out there, and they're in the same battle that you're in. They're in the trenches. You guys are fighting the same fights. So give me a story of something that went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it. So maybe they can apply that same lesson and learn from their situation.
I have a lot of them, by the way, Joe. Okay. Just, there's a lot of things that go wrong. It's not easy being a city manager, right?
I'm sure.
I like to remind people that it's like making sausage. You do not want to see what happens behind the doors. You appreciate the paved roads and you appreciate the clean streets, but to get to that point, sometimes it's a little ugly. I'll tell you an experience. One time, and this is a great example of me not communicating. I saw in another city I worked for so many shopping carts just littering the city.
Yeah.
And so, a typical public administrator would look at what are other cities doing, right? And I saw these great examples of ordinances that other cities were doing, enforcing no shopping carts and And if grocery stores let shopping carts leave their property, there was punitive damages. And just, I saw some great examples. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to bring this to my city council. And so never communicated it to the council, never communicated it to the grocery stores. I presented this beautiful policy that as a public administrator, I dug into, I did my research, I figured out the cost, the benefits. I was so proud of the work. The community came unglued. Every grocery store owner came out. Homeless advocates came out. My city council came out. It was one of the worst nights. Well, I won't say the worst night. It was a bad city council night.
Yeah.
And I realized that you got to bring people along with you. You have a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
You've got to bring people with you. And I had this brilliant idea thinking everyone would just get behind it because I did all the great public administrative work ahead of time, and I never communicated that work. So anyway, that was a lesson learned, that you got to bring people along with you throughout the process from the very beginning. Otherwise, you're just, spitting into the wind.
Sure. Good learning lesson on that. So how does Graham keep showing up better and better day after day, month after month, year after year? What do you do intentionally, professionally? Like, what type of personal development regimen do you have yourself on to show up better and better?
Well, one, I like to push myself to do new things. And I'll be honest with you, doing a podcast with you is not a comfortable thing for me.
Really?
But when you invited me, I said, I got to do it because I need to explore that side of me, an area that I'm not used to. Right. So I take risks. I take opportunities to push myself. That's why I teach at San Diego State University, because it pushes me to do new things, different things. But I do some things very intentional. I'm a credentialed city manager through ICMA. So I have to do 40 hours of continuous education, betterment, things that I work on myself as a professional. So I try to use that intentionally to do research or study or classes on areas that I know I have some deficiencies in. So right now I'm doing some work on performance measurements. It's an area that I don't do very well, and so I'm working on that right now.
Okay.
I've taken some classes, some leadership classes that are important to me that help me kind of better myself. And the one class I just finished, it was an ICMA Leadership Academy, and it was kind of based on General Colin Powell's, a lot of his leadership philosophy, and it just really resonated with me that he took. I love his approach to leadership and the way he would evaluate himself. And so, like, I actually have come up with a list of 5 questions that I evaluate myself at the end of every single day.
Okay.
I have a spreadsheet, and I keep track.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah. I'm a nerd that way, right?
Okay.
I score myself, and sometimes I'm not very good, right? So I kind of score myself and grade myself every day to see how I progress. So what you report on is you usually your areas of focus. So I kind of focus on those areas. So.
Okay. I respect that, the spreadsheet. I think if anybody used more spreadsheets in their life, they're getting better. Because like you said, if you can measure it, you can manage it for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about misconceptions of a city manager. Let's say we asked your golf buddy, right? If we asked him, what does Graham do all day, every day for the city of El Cajon? What would he get wrong in answering that question?
Well, the better would be ask my kids what I do.
Okay.
They think I just yell at people all day long. I think, most people don't know what that is, right? Like, a lot of times people, like, even my relatives will say, oh, Graham, he's the mayor of El Cajon, or Graham is the planning director of El Cajon. So, like, people don't even know what my title is, right? So I try to remind them that a city manager is like kind of a CEO of a company, right? The shareholders are the voters. They elect a board of directors who then appoint a CEO to really run the day-to-day business. But I think maybe some misconceptions is that I am literally on duty 24 hours a day. And it's something that I thrive on it. I love it. I do not mind to call at 2 a.m. about a crime incident or something that happened. But I don't think people realize that that does take a toll on somebody. So, so anyway, I think that's maybe one misconception. I think the other is that maybe we don't care about things. But I got to tell you, the city managers I know are some of the deepest caring people about their communities. They really work hard to make their communities better. And like me, I take it personally when people maybe don't recognize some of the amazing work that we're doing. And so, you know, we're a sensitive group of people. I think a lot of city managers are introverts. You don't think we are. I'm a massive introvert. But I really am. I do care about my city, and I think about it almost all the time. And to the point where my family sometimes has to tell me, "Hey, it's the weekend. I know you're thinking about work, but stop talking about it because we don't want to hear about it either." So anyway, so maybe there's a couple misconceptions.
Gotcha. Let's say Graham is commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of El Cajon. What ask of your community would you put on this billboard?
So Joseph, I'm gonna pull the curtains back on your podcast a little bit to the viewers. Joseph gave me this question ahead of time, right? So I don't want you people to think that this is off the top.
I appreciate
but
that.
I gotta tell you, as soon as I read that question, one thing popped in my mind. So this is not let me think about this over the weekend question. The answer would be stop getting your news from Facebook. That would be my billboard. When I look at national politics, it's insane, and it's driven by insanity on social media. And guess what? That same applies to local government. I'll go onto our website and I'll just see the most insane comments that are made or assertions made. And once you say it twice or three times, it's a truth, right? And so I would just say, you know what? Stop looking at your social media for your news source. It's not reliable. So that would be my billboard.
All right. I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors you had along your journey, and then also offer up a word of inspiration and motivation to your city manager countrywide counterparts.
All right. So first part, my very first city manager, his name was Chris Jeffers. He's retired now. But he gave me a shot, not only a shot, but he said a lot of times as city managers, they don't give their interns a lot of attention. He gave me a lot of attention. And there are things that he said to me that ring in my head almost every day. And that's a true mentor, right? Like I just rely on those messages. The other is council members. I've worked for 21 council members over the last 20 years, 23 years, good and bad. And some of them have been good mentors and some of them have been bad mentors, right? And so I love working with council members. And the last people I wanted to call out is kind of we used to be really isolated in who we communicated with, right? When I started my career, I only really talked to city managers in the county that I worked in. And maybe if I went to a city manager conference, I would talk to a few more throughout the state or around the country. Yeah. But platforms like that you have right now, or LinkedIn, or so many other podcasts, I learned so much from a mentor perspective from other people now. Yeah. I'll go back on social media. I admit I do get some mentoring on social media. Oops. I love the connection that I have now. It doesn't have to be geographic bound. Yeah. I'm learning from people from Massachusetts and Florida and Kansas, all over the United States. And I think it's a really cool opportunity for us to mentor each other in this platform. So I want to thank you for being part of that mentoring process of getting the word out to people.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Let's say I'm coming to El Cajon. I text you ahead of time. I'm like, Graham, where can I go to get the best burger in town? Where are you going to send me?
Well, we are California, so In-N-Out Burger.
Come on, no chains, man. No chains. Got to be mom and pop in El Cajon.
All right, I'll say about El Cajon. El Cajon is unique. We are a community that is heavily influenced by immigrants. We have one of the largest Chaldean communities, so Iraqi Christians in the United States outside of Iraq. Every time there's been a war in the Middle East, El Cajon has actually attracted refugees. So we have refugees from Iraq, refugees from Syria, refugees from now Afghanistan. So we have a very multicultural. So I wouldn't take you for hamburgers. I would take you for a kebab. And it'd be the best pita bread and the best baba ganoush and the best hummus you've ever had in your life.
Okay, I can get with it. I like it. I like it. All right, Graham. Thank you for hopping on the show. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Like Graham was saying, we learn from others' stories, from others, experiences. So share this with some city managers that you think might need to hear it. Any final words before we get out of here?
You know what? I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Graham Mitchell, LinkedIn. And I love to connect and I love to learn. So be a learner, be caring, and be innovative.
Thank you. All right, Graham. Well, once again, thanks for hopping on the show. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for tuning in.